Hello, everyone, and welcome to another FutureFeed Explorers webinar. I'm Tiffany Gross. I'm the Director of Education and Compliance at FutureFeed, and I'll be your host and moderator today. Quick housekeeping. Today's session is being recorded, and we'll share it afterwards. Please drop your questions into the Q&A panel at any point. We've set aside time at the end to go through as many questions as we can. Now I'm going to start with a question for you. Have you ever thought your cloud provider, MSP, or security vendor was responsible for a control only to discover that no one had clearly defined who owned it? This usually doesn't happen because someone simply ignored a control. More often, both sides assume the other was handling it. And even when the provider performs the work, your organization still has to verify it, document it, and maintain the evidence. That's what today's conversation is about. Understanding exactly whose control it is, and to help us work through it, I'm joined by two people who approach this from two very different seats. But before I introduce our two panelists, I want to quickly cover why we run this series. The Future Feed Explorers really comes down to one idea. Compliance is not a test you passed and forget about. It's something you build, and it's something you should be able to prove is working at any given day, not just when an assessor is in the room. Last week proved exactly why that matters. The rules just shifted under all of us. But here's what I want you to take away. When the rules move, the fundamentals don't. You still have to know your controls. You still have to own them, document them, and be ready to show they're working on demand. CMMC is our focus today. It's the lens that we're looking through. But the real goal is bigger than any single framework. It's a program that genuinely protects the information you've been trusted with, one that holds up no matter what changes next. So that's our job today. And we're going to start with one of the most misunderstood pieces of all, and that's shared responsibility. When you've got providers in your environment, a cloud platform, an MSP, a security vendor, who actually owns the controls? Now let's talk about, the slides aren't changing. Can you guys see my slides?
There you go.
There we go.
Oh, yep.
All right, so let's talk about the two panelists that are going to help us dig into this today. Let's see, starting with Alex. Alex is a senior solutions engineer at PreVeil with more than 5 years of hands-on experience in defense contract manufacturing. He's an ISSM. Alex guided 3 organizations through full CMMC assessments and has consulted with many more across the defense industry base through the defense industry base. At PreVeil, Alex helps contractors understand how end-to-end encrypted email and file sharing fit into their CMMC journey. Everything from scoping decisions to control inheritance across the industrial base. Alex holds the CCP certification. Alex, welcome and say hello.
Hey, everybody. Happy to be here. Like Tiffany said, coming over from the PreVeil side, as well as some extensive experience on the OSC side. So happy to be here and help to share some insight. Thanks, Tiffany.
Thanks, Alex. And Brooke. Brooke Justice is the president of JusticeIT Consulting, with a career in IT going all the way back to 1998, and experience across healthcare, the oil field, cattle ranching, retail, and manufacturing. He's a certified CMMC professional and a cyber AB registered practitioner. He's built distributed data solutions that deliver near real-time visibility in some genuinely remote environments. He's led work on cybersecurity, VoIP, network upgrades, mergers and acquisitions, virtualization, and cloud migrations, with certifications from Cisco, Novell, Microsoft, and SonicWall. And when he's not securing networks, he and his family raise award-winning cattle. Brooke, welcome and say hello.
Well, thanks. Glad to be here. Glad to be part of this. Might say also on the bio that we help companies be compliant with CMMC, of course. And we just got our level 2 certification as well. So thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate you introducing me.
Awesome. Thanks, Brooke. And before I hand it over to them, let me share why this topic matters so much to me. Before joining FutureFeed, I led an enterprise-wide CMMC implementation for a defense contractor. I worked across leadership, engineering, operations, HR, facilities, and IT to get ready for our assessment. That experience taught me how easily responsibilities can blur once MSPs, cloud providers, and security vendors are in the mix. And it reinforced the lesson I keep coming back to. You can delegate the work, but your organization stays accountable for understanding what's being handled by whom, and how it will be demonstrated. Here's where we're headed today. First, we'll start with the elephant in the room, last Monday's news and what it means for you. Then we'll get into the heart of our conversation, delegated responsibility versus delegated accountability. What a CRM actually is and how it fits in the shared responsibility model, the three buckets every control falls into, CSP versus non-CSP ESP, and who sets the bar, what to require from a CSP, where MSPs and MSSPs leave a gap, and finally, how to manage all of it with the GRC tool, plus your questions. We'll keep this conversational, so bring your questions as we go, and we'll make sure that we answer them as best we can. So let's address the elephant in the room. On Monday, July 13th, the Department of War announced the immediate suspension of CMMC Phase 2, the third-party certification that was set to take effect November 10th. Here's the short version, and it's right here on your screen. The third-party certification is suspended. A new reform task force has 60 days to recommend a lighter, more scalable model. There's a public comment window open right now, and it closes August 14th. So if you have not already, this is your moment to be heard. And here's the headline that I want you to hold on to. It's paused, but it's not canceled. So before we go any further, I want our experts' honest reactions. Alex, you've taken organizations all the way through full assessments. When this news hit last Monday, what was your first reaction, and what are you telling the contractors you work with right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as with everybody else, it was a bit of a shock to the system seeing the press release come out. But it's not bad news. The good news is that CMMC is not dead. CMMC still exists. It's just under a pause, as you highlighted, Tiffany. So when we look at, what are your requirements as a subcontractor? DFARS 252, 204, 7012, commonly known as DFARS 7012, is still in effect. It's still your legal requirement to protect CUI. We have a litany of punishments that are able to be brought down from the Department of Justice in the shape of false claims acts, and we've seen many big crimes and other customers of the government and suppliers of the government that are punished on it, unfortunately. So, the message from the PreVeil side and just in general is stay the course. Your requirements and your legal responsibility hasn't stopped. So keep working forward. Whatever happens with CMMC, DFAR 7012 is still there and you're still required to comply. So take advantage of this time that you don't have to move forward with an assessment right away to get yourself compliant and headed in the right direction.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. And Brooke, from your consulting seat, across all the industries that you serve, is there a reason to slow down or speed up? What are you advising your clients?
What we're telling everybody really just to keep on keeping on. There's no reason to stop being compliant. In fact, just as Alex stated, they specifically said DFAR still 7012 and phase one are still in effect. You still have to be compliant. You still have to protect the FCI and CUI. So we're telling our clients just keep on keeping on. In fact, even those that have assessments on the calendar, we've advised them, it's a business decision, of course, but it'd be good to keep those assessments on the books and go ahead and get them completed. If you don't have one on the books, if you don't have an assessment on the books, maybe you do pause on the certification portion of it. But effectively, this probably just gives you a little bit more time to make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed as far as all the compliance goes.
Okay, and I have a question for anyone tempted to shelve their program and decide they're not going to do it anymore. What would you say to that company?
Really, again, phase one and DFARS 7012 is in effect still, and CMMC was not canceled. I know that's the thing that some people took from that, but they specifically said you still have to be compliant, you still have to protect FCI and CUI. So you still have to do all the documentation, you still have to implement all the technical controls. So don't stop what you're doing. Just keep on moving.
Yep. Totally agree. I think last week we were all reacting. This week we need to make a plan. Here's the key. Where you stand is measurable. Every supplier is sitting in one of these four positions that you see on the screen right now. And when a prime screens its supply chain, each one carries a very different risk profile. Position one here is no Spurs score on file. That doesn't mean that it doesn't meet the requirement that's still in effect. To a prime, it's an eligibility question and an unmanaged risk. And to the government, invoicing on a covered contract without a current score is the exact fact pattern false claims acts are built on. Position two is a self-assessed score. That satisfies the current legal requirement, but DoD's own methodology rates it the lowest confidence level. It's your attestation, and it's only as strong as the evidence you put behind it. Position three is an independently reviewed score. A qualified third party, like someone like JusticeIT, will help you examine your evidence and stand behind the number. Now it's not just your word, and it's available right now at your own pace during the review period. Position four is still your full certification, a C3PAO assessment. It's the lowest risk profile a prime can accept, and it's a position several primes have already said they expect. Those assessments are happening this week and beyond, and the results flow into Spurs as usual. There's no single right answer. It depends on your contracts, your customers, and your risk tolerance. But you should leave today knowing which position you're in and which one you're moving towards. The good news is, no matter which position you're in, you've got a team behind you. PreVeil helps you put the controls in place. JusticeIT reviews the evidence and stands behind your number. And FutureFeed is the foundation underneath it all, where you document it, manage it, and prove it. Brooke and Alex, when a supplier asks you which position they should be in, how do you help them decide?
Yeah, so I mean, based off of the latest guidance, you should be at least targeting a position two. The guidance that came down from the CIO, Kirsten Davies, is that we have to be self-assessing and that you should have an up-to-date self-assessment score within SPRS. So you should at least be moving towards position two and absolutely leaning on people like Justice IT and Brooks' team or other MSPs in your landscape to help you along the way. I mean, let's face it, NIST 800-171 is confusing. There's a lot of intricacies. There's a lot of different ways to skin the cat and get from point A to point B. So we want to make sure that you're moving along in a direction that makes sense for you. And so lean on those professional resources to help you get along the path. And if you're already sitting in section four and position four, take a deep breath, but make sure you're keeping up with your continued compliance, because at the end of that first year, you've got to make sure you're still self-assessing and self-attesting to your continued compliance.
So in your opinion, either one of you guys, who should be taking a long, hard look at their certification today? Which ones are like the highest risk and should still continue moving forward? Are there any?
I think a lot of, if you are working directly with the government and you had a contract that was awarded prior to the announcement last Monday, you still very much could have a contract that states that you have to be level two certified. And so make sure you're checking with your primes, make sure you're checking with the government directly. If you don't know what's in your contract, you could be in a spot where not getting assessed and not having that certification could put you at risk to not be able to participate in that program. So definitely make sure you're taking a look at what your contract states, because that's going to be the authoritative source on where you need to be able to continue to work those programs.
Absolutely. And Brooke, if one of your customers come and say, does it still make sense for me to spend the time and money getting a higher level authorization now? What do you say to them?
It's always a business decision, but when you can lean on somebody's personal or the professional, excuse me, opinion of where your score is at and everything, that gives you a lot more backing. And it's like Alex said, it's NIST 800-171 is just a little confusing when you just go read the controls. As an IT guy, you look and you see something that says identify or authorize. That might mean one thing to me, but what does it actually mean for the control? What will an assessor look for? What does the NIST 800-171 alpha look? What is it looking for? It's always good to get a third party professional review done to check on that. full certification, that just gives you a lot of that gives you a lot more weight to put behind your score with primes and with the government to know that your score that you're reporting, if you're reporting a 110 and you're self-assessed, that might look like one thing. If you've got a 110 and you're fully certified, that's certainly another that carries a lot more weight.
Absolutely. I would say that that C3PAO assessed environment is definitely maybe an insurance policy for you, especially if a false claim act comes your way. It definitely helps you with protecting yourself and your company and your assets. Um, so moving on from that, let's keep going. So one idea that I would tattoo on every single SSP if I could, and I wish I would have learned this earlier instead of learning it the hard way, but you can hand a provider the work, implementing the controls, running the tools, monitoring, patching the day-to-day. They can do all of that for you, but you can never hand off the accountability. I repeat that. You can never hand off accountability. Understanding and validating your CRM or your SRM, the assessment outcome, your SPUR scores, those are always the responsibility of the organization seeking certification, or it's the company's responsibility, the one that's holding the contract. So just remember, you can delegate the doing, but you can't delegate the owning. So Alex, organizations hear CRM and shared responsibility model constantly. In plain English, what do those actually mean and why do they matter so much?
Sure, absolutely. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide here, Tiffany. So when we look at what CRM is, what's a shared responsibility matrix? So by definition, both of those have to do with a full outline of NIST 800-171. So they take every control, and just for clarity's sake, there's 110 controls in NIST 800-171 Rev 2. Underneath each of those, you have objectives. So there's 320 total objectives across NIST 800-171 Rev 2. So a customer responsibility matrix and a shared responsibility matrix are going to give you the outline of what responsibilities your CSP, your cloud service provider, or your external service provider is doing, and then what you're responsible for. So in layman's term, it's your roadmap for understanding what your company is responsible for versus what the third party is responsible for. Now, you're going to see many different things throughout your review of these different matrices. You're going to see terminology is very important: inherited, shared, and customer. So an inherited control is a control that your third party, whether it's a cloud service provider, an external service provider, is saying that they are fully implementing on your behalf, and you get to inherit that control. So examples that you might see would be, here we see data center physical security. It could be things like encryption at rest, encryption in transit, as PreVeil provides. So there's different controls across those 800-171 controls that will be fully inherited by your provider. It's very important that you understand which of those are fully inherited, and that then it's documented within your system security plan. When an assessor comes in, they're going to look at the evidence that you have and the evidence that's available in a FedRAMP body of evidence or additionally provided evidence by your provider that supports the fact that that is an inherited control. So you have to read it. You have to make sure that if they didn't put it in simple terms for you to understand, that you work with whoever your contact is at that company to understand deeper. And same way with shared. So shared is where you have a control where both people and both parties have some sort of enforcement. It could be things like an MFA where it's enforced technically by the cloud service provider, but you still have a responsibility to monitor and to make sure that logging is taking place properly. So it's important to read very fine-tuned and understand that a control itself might be marked shared, and there might be 3 objectives underneath that. 2 of them are inherited and 1 of them is shared with you. So it's very important that you read through and understand that you don't get into a spot where you say, oh, well, I just thought they were doing it. It has to be outlined. And you should be pressing your service providers to make sure that they provide you an accurate and complete responsibility matrix. And to the point of the customer, if anybody's selling you that they can 100% get you to CMMC, NIST 800-171, compliance, I highly recommend that you run, because it's not something that can be done. You still have customer responsibilities. You still need to do training. You still need to do background checks. You still need to partake in access control. Like, there are things that at the organizational level you will be responsible for. So make sure you're reading that, if they're saying that they're doing your background checks, but they're only providing you a system to store CUI in, that's probably not an accurate shared responsibility matrix. So it's important that you read through it and understand, what they're actually doing for you, so you don't accidentally sign into a control compliance decision when it's not actually compliant. So, and this is the point on the wording importance. Supports can, is capable of, they don't mean implements. Implements means that it's fully met. That it's fully implemented and it is compliant. So make sure as you're going through those, you're looking for direct language. We don't want to leave yourself in an opportunity where you sign in for something that you think is going to end one way and it ends another way because the wording was not accurate. So you truly want to read this, put on your lawyer mindset. Read between the lines, read to make sure you fully understand, because I promise you, your assessor is going to look at that very in depth, and they're going to want to make sure that they understand what whatever solution you're using is doing for your organization. So definitely keep that in mind. Tiff, you can go ahead to the next slide here. So when we look at the buckets of responsibility, as we touched on, you have inherited, shared, and customer. So obviously the easiest is that you get an inherited control, because that's something that a third party is taking part in for you. They're fully doing it. They're fully implementing it. You're able to just inherit their evidence, inherit their responsibility. It could look like a FedRAMP body of evidence. It could look like additional evidence. It could look like a flowed down CMMC level 2 certificate with additional inheritance. It could look like your MSP handling your vulnerability and patch management, and they're inheriting the control to do that and partaking in your assessment. So inherited's great because you get to pass some of that responsibility, but again, to Tiffany's point, you're still accountable. And so you want to make sure that you're also then holding whoever you're working with accountable as well. Shared, like I said, is a combination. It's both parties have to partake, or you might have a shared control where you have multiple. You have 3, 4, or 5 external service providers or cloud providers that are partaking. So understanding that a shared responsibility and a customer responsibility matrix are not specific to the platform. It's specific to NIST 800-171. And so a control cannot be fully inherited by a provider unless it actually fully implements that control for you. So again, that's reading through, making sure that there's not additional responsibilities that you have to partake in. And then of course, customer stuff that you have to implement and evidence gather for yourself. So ultimately it comes down to who you're dealing with. A cloud service provider, they're going to store, process, or transmit CUI, and they have to meet the FedRAMP moderate or moderate equivalency bar. And so they're going to be able to provide you a FedRAMP body of evidence. They should be able to provide you a full shared responsibility or customer responsibility matrix so that you can understand what you're dealing with and that you have confidence walking into your assessment. And then you have the external service provider. So the majority of the time, your cloud service providers are not going to be actively involved in your assessment. Your cloud service providers are going to be providing you a FedRAMP body of evidence that has been certified through a FedRAMP audit to make sure that they're meeting what they say that they're doing. And then that body of evidence becomes your evidence for your assessment. Whereas an external service provider may be involved in your assessment. They likely don't have any access to CUI. There are some lighter formal requirements there, but they still need to tell you what they're doing and have documentation and evidence to be able to prove that to you. So at the end of the day, you need to read it. Don't just glance over it. Don't say it doesn't matter. And if you don't understand it, ask questions. There are a ton of people within the environment within NIST 800-171 compliance. Reach out to Brooke's team over at JusticeIT and ask those questions. It's important that you understand what's in there so you don't start yourself down a wrong path. You want to make sure that you start off on the right foot. So next slide, Tiffany.
There's
Sorry,
actually a question in there asking about the Microsoft GCC High CRM or general CRMs.
Okay.
Can you just give a high level explanation of Microsoft, like the GCC High or the CRMs that they're working with, and help and make sure they understand what that means? Again, the accountability and responsibility framework around that.
Sure,
Same with
absolutely.
PreVeil. Yeah.
Yep. So on the GCC High side of things, so GCC High is covered underneath FedRAMP. So as part of their FedRAMP authorization, they are covered so that they provide you, to your point in the question, a customer responsibility matrix. So in that case, they're going to tell you as part of their FedRAMP body of evidence and then their list that here's what you need to go do. They're not going to necessarily get into the detail of what they're doing. They're going to tell you, hey, we're handing you Intune, we're handing you Purview, great, but now you need to go do these things for your individual controls. And same deal with general CRMs. It's going to be the same sort of thing. Now, when you're working with a cloud service provider, it's very important that you're getting your FedRAMP body of evidence and you're getting your customer responsibility or shared responsibility matrix. If you're working with somebody who claims to be FedRAMP moderate, equivalent, or moderate in the FedRAMP marketplace, and they can't provide that to you, you cannot store CUI within their environment. It is not allowed per DFAR 7012. So make sure that you're getting that and that you're having those conversations with your cloud service providers. PreVeil, to your question, Tiffany, we provide our SRM, we do a shared responsibility matrix to all of our customers. And then we also share our body of evidence for our FedRAMP moderate equivalency as well. So you will receive those as part of being a customer. You will have those for your documentation and you'll be able to lean on those as part of your assessment. And it's vetted, it's verified. We've had over 100 customers go through it. So it's something that you definitely need to be asking if they're not already offering it to you. Okay, so getting into CSP versus non-ESP. So on the CSP side of things, so as I touched in here a little bit, the bar is FedRAMP moderate or equivalent. That is specifically outlined in the legal side of DFAR 7012. So anything that stores, processes, or transmits CUI has to be FedRAMP moderate or equivalent. File sharing, email storage, backups, anything that has a copy of CUI. It doesn't matter if it's encrypted or not. The DoD has been very clear that encrypted CUI is still CUI. It has to be at a FedRAMP moderate or equivalent level. So like I said, they owe you a CRM, they owe you a body of evidence, an SSP excerpt or customer implementation summary. Like all of these are things that they're going to have to provide you. Now, there are movements within the assessment space where, for example, GCC High, they no longer need to provide you their body of evidence. The assessors have been instructed to take the FedRAMP out of the FedRAMP marketplace and let that count. So make sure that you're talking through phase one of your assessment with your assessors to understand which body of evidences they're going to ask you for and which ones they're not going to be concerned about. That's a very important delineation that you have in the conversations. They should guide you through that process. It's not something that you are going to have to, run to them and ask yourself. But keep that in the back of your mind that there are some FedRAMP moderate or high solutions like AWS Gov and stuff that they don't have to provide you the body of evidence for you to be able to use them in your assessment. So ultimately what you get to inherit is real attestable controls backed by their authorization. The FedRAMP process is not light. We are just getting ready to kick off our yearly review, and it's cumbersome. It's definitely something that takes a lot of time and a lot of fine tuning. So, it's something that it's real, it's attestable. Companies that are on the equivalency path have to prove that they are completely compliant with all of the FedRAMP requirements. So it's to your benefit to use FedRAMP moderate or equivalent or better companies when you're looking at where to keep your CUI. And then you still are going to have your CRMs as part of that. And of course, your examples, PreVeil, GCC High, compliant backup solutions are all where the FedRAMP side of things hit. So we'll kick it over to Brooke on the ESP side.
Sure, as a non-CSP ESP. So it's going to be your MSPs, MSSPs, any tools that you use to secure that CUI that are cloud hosted are going to be ESPs, external service providers, right? for instance, if your MSP has admin access, but no access to CUI, they don't host any CUI. That CRM really is, or SRM, and I'll just say CRM because everybody uses those terms interchangeably. So, but that's all you need is that. Not all you need a good CRM. We'll stipulate that, but you need that CRM. If your MSP, for instance, does host any data for you, then they're going to come in scope and they're going to be a COI asset, and they're going to have their own certification as well. So, or likely will have. There's a lot of there's some other factors there. There are lighter than formal CMMC requirements for a non-CSP ESP. Whatever that tool or that MSP is securing for you, uh, as far as CUI goes, that's where they'll come into scope and will be assessed. They'll have to meet all the assessment objectives that pertain to them. So they will be part of that assessment. Also, one thing you need to watch out for, there are plenty of tools that give you a CRM. You need to watch out for those tools that automatically upload files like an EDR that may upload files to detonate to, a suspicious file may upload it to detonate it to see what that file does. And I'm sure you can think of some of those tools that do that. Most of those have a setting where you can turn that portion off where it won't upload those files because you don't want it inadvertently uploading CUI because then that'll bring it in scope, right? The You also need to determine that leads into the next one. Determine the categories for each of your ESPs, each of your tools or MSPs. Are they a CUI asset? Are they a security protection asset? Are they out of scope? What are they? And there's some of my notes snuck in there, but you see it there. You got to be honest with yourself. Is it really an SPA or is it does it fall into a CUI category? You got to be honest, and that's the same sort of thing we tell people when at the beginning of a gaps assessment is being honest, trying to figure out what kind of CUI they hold. Right? It's all about the CUI, and these tools are no different. You've got to be honest with yourself, or the ESP's got to be honest with themselves about what kind of classification their tools are going to be.
So what's the easiest or fastest way to determine the difference between a CSP or an ESP?
So a CSP, actually, the government has, I think it's a NIST 800-145. Looking at some of my notes over here. There's on-demand service, broad network access, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, and a measured service. So think Microsoft 365, things like that. Those are going to be CSPs. If you don't meet those, MSP may they may provide a service, but it's not necessarily an on-demand automatically provisioned service, for instance. So that's where the difference comes in between a CSP and an ESP.
Okay. So what about those companies that don't have a big cloud company like Microsoft or Amazon? Does that mean that they don't have to worry? Like, what does this mean for them?
They have to step back and look and see what that tool is doing for them. If it's hosting CUI, it absolutely 1,000% comes into scope. And then they either have to be looking at FedRAMP moderate or equivalent, FedRAMP moderate authorization or equivalency, or some cases maybe a level 2 certification for that ESP.
Okay. Wait, so if you're dealing with the true CSP, what should you demand from them? I'm gonna go to the next slide here.
So if you're dealing with a true CSP, you're going to demand that they're moderate or equivalent or better. You're going to want to make sure that if they're storing CUI, that they are going to fall into that. So they should have a published CRM, SSP excerpt. They're going to have a body of evidence that's able to be presented. These are all things that you need to ask. On the contractual side of things, DFAR 7012 is very clear that you need a 72-hour incident reporting window. That should be within your SLA, that if they have anything that if there's a violation or a breach on their side, that you are able to get a report within that time frame, because you are contractually required legally to report yourself if it's something that's touching the CUI that you are an owner of in the eyes of the government. So definitely make sure you're checking SLAs to understand for sure what their incident reporting level is. And Matt Travis has confirmed multiple different webinars and as part of the Cyber AB town hall, FedRAMP 20X is not approved for CUI and CMMC. The DoD has not made a final verification that it is, and so at this time, FedRAMP 20X is not. I know there are a lot of CSPs in the workspace out here that are advertising that they're 20X. That's not good enough. They have to be FedRAMP moderate or equivalent. So make sure you're pushing any solutions that you're targeting or any solutions that you currently have. If they are not able to verify that they're moderate or equivalent and that they're saying that they're 20X, that's not acceptable for CUI at this time.
Right. What do you see as the biggest mistake when someone accepts a CSP's paperwork?
I saw it all the time working through assessments myself, where you get busy. There's a lot of papers to review, and so you just say, well, they definitely have their stuff together. I don't need to review this. And before you know it, you get it down the line a little bit, and hopefully you catch it before your assessment, and a control that you thought you were inheriting, you're not inheriting. So you get into a spot where now you have to figure out, do you need another tool? Do you need to rework your tools? And then it just leads to a litany of changes to documentation. So, definitely don't just take it at face value. Read it, have conversations with your customer success manager, try to talk to their compliance team if you have questions. At the end of the day, you need to understand what's in there more than anything. So push back, have those conversations.
Absolutely. Right. Well, not every provider in the environment is a CSP. Brooke, this is where you come in with the ESPs. Take us into this world, the providers that may never need to be certified themselves, but still have to survive my assessment.
Absolutely. So, and it depends on what sort of ESP, not a CSP, that you are. Um, you'd think they could have come up with a different term than that, but so you really need, every SP is going to need a CRM, whether they're FedRAMP or not. You're going to need a CRM. An SRM, if you can get an SRM an SRM is going to tell you what they do and what you do, not just the customer responsibility. So really, an SRM, I like to get those if at all possible. They give you the whole story and not just one side of it. But you've got to get anything that protects your environment, protects that CUI in any manner, going to be your SIM, your MSP, your EDR, stuff like that. If it's cloud if it's external to you, then you're going to need a CRM from those, from that ESP. If you have an MSP, your MSP needs to make sure that any of their tools that are in the cloud, which most of them are going to be your SIM, your EDR again. Those are just the easiest examples to think of, but those you're going to need CRMs for them, and the MSP is going to need to understand each of those each of those CRMs, and really go through it and understand it, and know what they're supposed to be doing for their clients, right? So you have to make sure that your MSP, the stuff that they're inheriting from those CRMs, you're inheriting, and that it's all you know exactly what's going on there. Again, I think Alex talked about this a minute ago, but the CRMs really should address all the assessment objectives, all 320 assessment objectives. It's fine to address the controls, but the assessment objectives really get down to the nitty gritty. That's what the assessors look at. Really, they don't even look at the control statement necessarily. They look at all the assessment objectives. So when they look at those assessment objectives, that's what they're matching up there. So if those CRMs really should be matched up against all 320 assessment objectives. That doesn't mean that every ESP is going to cover all 320. They'll just cover the ones that they cover for you. EDR is only going to cover what an EDR covers. It's not going to cover physical security, for instance. Um, then again, those as far as clearly defined responsibilities, um, that CRM, as Alex mentioned a while ago, it needs to be clear what is your responsibility. Really needs to be clear at least what is your responsibility, but preferably what the ESP's responsibility is as well. Um, if you use words like supports or assists or something like that, what does that really mean? Yes, the assessor can probably ask during the assessment, but you don't want to have to go down to that detail because you might find out that it meant something other than what you thought. So if a good thing is to use the same kind of language that's in the assessment objectives, define, review, monitor, authorize, but clearly define what the customer is supposed to do and what that ESP does. Those are very important.
All right, Brooke. So I have a really long question, but I think it's a good one that Tim White posted for us. He said some solution providers are advertising being an SPA only while processing no CUI. One example is Total, who provides a SIM, SOC, MXDR solution that integrates with local resources in M365 GCC High. They share that as long as no CUI enters their system, legal responsibility is on our part as a DIB contractor. They're not required to provide FedRAMP certification, and they do have templates for their SRM CRM. I can see how we can limit data flows to potentially eliminate any CUI export to them. Is this something you see in SIM MXDR space, and is it typically defensible in an audit?
It is. You just have to make sure that you have everything configured properly, right? If you're using a something like Total, a SASE or a ZTNA for essentially a VPN, newfangled VPN, right? Then it can't be uh, well, if they're not FedRAMP authorized or equivalent, then they can't be the ones encrypting the CUI for one. Two, they can't process or host it on their site. So uh, the as far as the other platforms, yes, SIM, EDR, XDR, you just need to make sure that none of that CUI enters their platform. Again, going back to some of the tools that upload suspicious files for detonation in a protected environment, that's one of those things that you need to make sure you flip that switch and turn that off, and that's not possible. I think that answered that question.
Think so. So let's keep going. We're running short on time now, but Brooke, let's kill the myth right here. My provider is SOC 2. Doesn't that cover me?
If only. No, it does not. SOC 2, for instance, and ISO 27001 are both organizational risk-based frameworks. They don't map to CMMC. And essentially, since they're organizational risk-based, you get to make up your own controls. Not exactly, that's a way oversimplification, but essentially you get to make your own controls. Now, they do not map to CMMC. So everything that you have needs to be able to map to CMMC. Your CRMs need to map to the 320 assessment objectives, or at the very least, the 110 controls. So yeah, that's SOC 2 is and any of the other certification programs or auditing or assessor programs are not the same as CMMC.
Yeah, I just like to add, I heard from one of my mentors in the industry that SOC 2, ISO, some of those other frameworks, they are more descriptive in nature, whereas NIST 800-171 is very prescriptive, which means it's telling you exactly what you have to have versus you being able to tell us what you want to have. So that's a clear way to respond to your providers when they say, oh, we're SOC 2, so we're fine. You can come back and say, no, that's not how it works.
Absolutely. Helps out, but it doesn't get the ball there.
Yeah.
The OSC as OSC that you remain accountable. Again, you can outsource work, and just like you've said, Tiffany, you can't outsource accountability. There's no way you can do that. It's the buck stops with the OSC. The buck stops with the CEO or whoever may be in charge there. And it's the ultimate responsibility of that OSC to make sure that they understand and validate those CRMs.
For sure.
All right. I know we're short on time, so I'll just kind of run through these. These are things that we see that come up that are not necessarily talked about in a lot of places. Uh, Assessment reality one of the things we see is the backup provider stores encrypted backups containing CUI, and it goes offsite to a commercial cloud instead of a FedRAMP authorized or equivalent. That's a big no-no. Watch out for that. Even if it's, I mean, if it's encrypted and you upload it, the DOW has come out and said no, that's encrypted. CUI is still CUI, and it has to go on a FedRAMP authorized or equivalent cloud. Another reality is that there are some MSPs who have people that are not U.S. persons working for them. So if they have any access to any of those systems that have ITAR, no foreign export controlled, anything like that, you've got to rethink that and rethink what they have access to. That's another thing you've got to think about. It's not necessarily specifically CMMC, but is matters with the type of CUI that you have. Another assessment reality is MSP technicians. They're going to be asked, do you do background screening? Do you check your techs? So those kind of things have to be done. Sometimes we see reality number four is sometimes we see that the MSPs, RMM, the SIM, EDR, any other remote management tools are security protection assets, but they're not identified, not documented. Those all have to be documented somewhere to make sure that you're calling those out and specifying what they are and how they're protected.
Hey, Brooke, so there's a question out here from Tim White. He says a lot of technical teams rely on RMM tooling for patching and scripting. Does a RMM have to be either on-prem only or FedRAMP moderate to be able to be used in an export controlled context?
Not necessarily, but you do have to have your CRM because if it's a security protection asset, that's an ESP. And so you have to make sure it's configured properly and that you have your CRM.
All right. Tell us about the MSP MSSP gap.
All right. So gap one is audit exposure. Audit exposure and inherited hygiene are really pretty closely related, but audit exposure is going to be things like poor ongoing, no MFA for some systems. These are the systems that fall in scope for SPA. No MFA for certain things, poor logging, unstructured or poor patching. Inherited hygiene is going to be poor ongoing documentation, maybe poor, every MSP, for instance, uses a ticketing system, so maybe they don't have a really good formal documentation procedure for the tickets. There's a lack of a change management process. There has to be some sort of change management process to, if Jane Doe calls in and says, "Hey, I need a new user," but she's not one of the authorizers, does that user get created, or do you go through a change management process? Make sure the correct person authorizes that. And again, the gap is SOC 2 does not equal CMMC. We've talked about that. SOC 2 does not help at all during assessment, so you might as well just leave it off. It's just fluff that doesn't need to be there. As far as gaps and real world scenarios, gaps that show up, the domain admin and offshore tech go together quite a bit. So MSP will hold domain admin over your CUI environment, but who has access to that, right? Is it, again, we talked about it, but are all those people U.S. persons? Do they need to be U.S. persons? What type of CUI is it? And is there a shared domain account? Is there just-in-time accounts? Are there individual accounts for a domain admin? All are okay, but they need to be configured and documented and accessed properly. and provably. And again, the backup region, wherever you back up your CUI to, where does it go to? Does it go, is it only in the US? Is it cloud provided with not with no FedRAMP? Does it happen to get stored offshore somewhere? So those are all things that you need to think about.
So of the three scenarios that you have on here, which one do you catch most often, and how do you remediate it?
That's a good question. There's a couple of them, but really the poor documentation is the biggest thing that we see most often. We may, as MSPs or IT guys, we may have a few things documented, and we think everything's documented well, but not specifically like CMMC and the NIST 800-171 specify. That's the biggest thing. And offshore SOC or offshore tech help for MSP is another big one that we see come up.
All right, so there's a question in here about the GRC tools, but I want to be clear. Everything we've talked about today, multiple providers, hundreds of objectives and responsibilities that may be inherited, shared, or retained, it becomes really difficult to manage in a spreadsheet, right? This is where FutureFeed helps bring structure to your process. You can bring each provider's CRM into one centralized repository. You can map your controls to your boundary and your framework. You can assign ownership, and you can document whether each responsibility belongs to the provider, the customer, or both. When a provider releases a new CRM, your team can redline it against the previous version and document any changes in responsibility. FutureFeed gives you a central place to manage that process, while your organization stays responsible for reviewing what changed and determining how it affects your environment. As we said earlier, CRMs and SRMs are living documents. FutureFeed helps you keep them current, visible, and connected to the rest of your compliance program. We've looked at how FutureFeed helps you document and manage these responsibilities. And we want to talk about now our key takeaways. So if there's nothing else, let's take these 6. And I'm going to let Alex and Brooke walk through them for you.
Sure, absolutely. So number one being delegated responsibility is not delegated accountability. You still own the outcome. Your affirming official is still the one that has to put their name on it and their stamp of approval. So you can't hand that off. You have to make sure that you're being accountable for what's going on. 2, every control in a CRM is one of 3. Inherited, shared, or customer responsibility. Make sure you understand it. Make sure you understand what your responsibilities are. And 3, a CSP that holds COI must be in FedRAMP moderate or equivalent and have a published CRM. There is no way around it. That is the legal requirement of DFAR 7012.
Absolutely. Number 4 is a vague CRM wording. Alex and I both touched on it, but vague CRM wording really makes the control the OSCs, even if the intent is otherwise. 5, a non-CSP ESP is a quiet gap. It absolutely is. You need to make sure all your bases are covered, whether it's an MSP or some other sort of SPA tool. Manage CRMs as living documents. Re-verify when services change. You absolutely need to verify at least annually that those CRMs are still applicable and valid, and that no changes have been made to those.
Thank you. All right, so let's get into the questions. We have over 30 questions, so we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but I do want to touch on a few. I'm going to start with the question in here about the yearly SPURS scores. So somebody posted in here asking, once they get their level 2 certification, they only have to do it every 3 years. Please hear me clearly. That is not correct. You have to go back every single year in between and self-assess and self-attest. You have to put it in there, and you have to have an official within your organization sign off on it every single year. Understanding that there are changes and you're going through change management, you may have continuous improvement. Things may change in your environment. So your SSP is a living, breathing document, and it changes as you make changes in your environment. And you should be able to track everything back to your configuration management control family through change requests and change management. So want to be clear, every year you have to go and put in a SPUR score. There's another one on here asking about VoIP or IoT devices that are on the network. Brooke, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. I'm not sure exactly what it's asking, but just plain old about VoIP and IoT devices. Uh, Really, the best thing for VoIP is, if at all, you can scope it out and put it on its own VLAN, untrusted VLAN, to where it can't access any other data. That's the best way to go with that. IoT, they really need to be on their own VLAN. It depends on if it's true IoT, if it's an Amazon Alexa. I hope it's not on your corporate network in the first place. But those definitely need to be on their own untrusted VLAN or network, however it may be configured. They need to be segmented off.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question. If an OSA is wholly owned subsidiary of, I think it's a holding company, the holding company supplies shared IT services to the subsidiary. Is the holding company possibly an MSP or MSSP? And would it need to supply a CRM or SRM?
No, what we've seen typically is that it matters how you get the business, where your cage code is, who the highest level owner is, all that kind of fun stuff. But assuming it's a subsidiary, if that parent company or holding company provides services, those services come into scope, but they don't necessarily need a CRM or an SRM for those. But they do come in scope, and they will be reviewed.
Okay. Here's another one that's basic that we actually didn't cover, but what does the word CRM mean, and what's the difference between CRM and SRM?
Alex?
So CRM is customer responsibility matrix, SRM is shared responsibility matrix. From a high level, customer responsibility is going to tell you what you need to do. Shared responsibility is going to tell you what your provider is doing and what you need to do. So it's going to be something that is, the SRM's a little bit more descriptive. You're going to see a CRM come from a Microsoft, a Google, stuff like that. You're going to see more of an SRM come from companies where you're more interacting, maybe with their support and with their tool.
Thank you. All right, guys, we are out of time. You're at the top of the hour. I do just want to say thank you, everyone that joined us. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us. If you remember one thing today, let it be this. You can outsource technology, you can outsource services, you can outsource but you cannot outsource accountability. Just a little bit of housekeeping again, we'll send out the recording and the resources plus details on our next Explorer session. If you do just one thing this week, make sure you read your CRMs that you have. And if you don't have any, make sure you ask for them and confirm what's actually yours and what belongs to your service provider. Again, thank you again to Alex and Brooke for attending. Thank you, PreVeil. Thank you, JusticeIT. And thank you all for joining another FutureFeed Explorers webinar. We'll see you next time.